representing Franchise Secrets, Erik Von Horn.
Welcome to the Franchise Secrets podcast with your host, Erik Van Horn. Today's very special guest is Shelly Sun. Now, I've known about Shelly for a long time. She is the founder and still with BrightStar. That's a senior care company, an in-home care company. And I believe you did medical as well. I'm not sure if you still do that. And then you were the chairwoman for the IFA for a number of years as well, which in the franchising world, franchisees, you may not know a lot about the IFA. You should know a lot about the IFA. And it's a big deal that she was the chairwoman for the IFA. So I cannot wait to dive into this. She helps emerging franchisors. She has a book on it. She's been a franchisee. She is a franchisor. She started that. So we got so many places to go, Shelly. Thank you for coming on.
Oh, pleasure to be here. And, I would just elaborate maybe on the IFA experience. We have been very active in a lot of issues for franchisees the last year. I've continued, even though I chaired in 2017, 2018, continue to stay very active. I'm probably on calls with members of Congress 10 times a week, and our brand probably puts out a few hundred communications to members of Congress every single month. So everything that's been done with PPP loans and some of the tax policy that we're looking at now, PRO-ACT, et cetera, we're continuing to be very involved in. So hopefully all of your listeners are involved in those topics as well.
So franchisees, IFA is really important to franchisors. It's important to you as a franchisee as well, but a lot of it's done through the franchisor. And so you just talk to your franchisor, ask them about their involvement in the IFA and just ask them some questions, and maybe they are really involved, and then that's awesome. If they're not that involved, then just ask them some questions and maybe it will prompt them to become more involved. But Shelly, how did you even get your start in franchising?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I'd started my own business back in 2002. So BrightStar Care, and you said it well, helps take care of moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas in their home, both medical and non-medical and medical staffing, and moved from one location to a second and a third. Felt like I kind of had something there. And then divine intervention, maybe. I became a co-owner of a Choice Hotels branded hotel and went to new manager and new owner training. And I sat there in training and said, oh my goodness, I think I could totally franchise BrightStar Care. I eventually want to take care of more families across the country. I believe in the franchise business model, particularly with as intimate of a service as we provide. That really needs to be delivered locally with a passionate owner who's wanting to make a difference in their community. Our model makes so much sense for that. So that was 2004, going to training with Choice Hotels, did all the operations manuals and everything in 2005, and opened our first franchise in 2006. And within 5 years, went from 1 million in revenue to 100 million in system-wide revenues at the start of our franchise brand.
That's awesome. And I know, so I run a mastermind for franchisees. Franchisees join my mastermind to be around other like-minded franchisees, be around the top 10, 20, the top 1%. And we have some incredible discussions that Brian Scudamore is going to come on and host one of the meetings that we have. And I'm sure you know Brian well. But it's a really cool thing. But here's the thing with that mastermind. By the way, if you're interested in the mastermind, go to franchisetribemastermind.com or just franchisetribe.com. But there are franchisees in there right now, all franchisees. But as I'm leading that thing and a franchisor now, it's like raising the bar for other franchisees that are in there thinking, why don't I just become a franchisor? There's a lot of reasons not to do that, but there are a lot of reasons to do that. So what was it about you at that time that said, if Choice Hotels can do it, I can do it with this other business?
Yeah, I think I had the ambition and desire to scale the business and be in more markets across the country. And it was either going to go raise private equity money and hire employees to do that for me in other locations across the country, or license my brand with franchisees And again, I feel very passionately that a lot of businesses can be executed so much better with someone who it's their own sweat equity, their own money invested in the business. It's them. It's the franchisee that's seen other families at a little league game or PTA meetings or Chamber of Commerce. They're part of that community. It is as much their personal reputation and professional reputation intertwined. So franchising made a lot of sense on how I wanted to see our business model executed. Now, I see some of my franchisees make as much money as a franchisor does. So I'd say for some of those in your mastermind, you don't have to necessarily become a franchisor to have great success and scalability. I've got many franchisees that are doing, 10, $15 million of revenue per year out of a franchisee, base of operations. And that's not unusual with a whole lot less risk of startup costs. But it depends on the brand, depends on the industry and the pace of growth.
Well, as a franchisee, you learn a lot about franchising, what you like, what you don't like about it. And then as you start to go over to the franchisor side, you start to understand why the franchisor makes the decisions that they have to make at many times. So as you're advising, let's say there's an emerging brand or somebody that is just either about ready to do their FDD or wondering if they should do the FDD, meaning they are really close to becoming a franchisor. What questions would you ask them to make sure that they should become a franchisor? And let's assume it's a sound business model.
Yeah. So, assuming it's a sound business model, because I do believe the best brands have had personal experience and have actually done what they're going to ask other people to do. We all know in franchising, that's not always the case. So it's one of the things that I coach franchisees to look for, making sure there's practical experience going on. But just because a company-owned unit for a franchisor made money doesn't mean a franchisee would make money. So when I'm coaching emerging franchisors, like, take your company-owned model. Now assume you are a franchisee. What are all the costs that you have to pay to your franchisor for royalties, for general marketing fund fees, for technology fees? What are all the fees that you have that are incremental? And can the franchisee still make a good rate of return on the level of investment they're having to make? And if they can, then it could be a franchisable business. Making sure the franchisor is adequately capitalized to be able to support the franchisees they're going to commit to. I'm sure we've both seen a lot of franchisors that have the $100,000 to launch their franchise program, and they don't have another dollar beyond that to support the franchisees they sell. And you never want to see a franchisor having to sell franchises to make payroll or to keep in business. Just not healthy, right? It should be selection, not sales, of a franchisor in awarding their franchises, making sure they're competent, they're driven, they're well capitalized. And so that's one of the things I'm looking for when I'm coaching emerging franchisors is adequate capitalization. And what are the things that you don't know how to do that need to be done really well on your team, so that you're building out an initial team of exceptional talent to support your franchisees and award your franchises with skill sets you probably don't have. You know how to run your business. You might be able to do training. You might be able to participate in franchise sales, but you probably aren't a franchise salesperson, and you probably aren't completely an ops person either. And those are key skill sets that a franchisee should be able to rely on as part of what they're buying.
I think that's important because I see a lot of franchisees or a business owner turn it into a franchise. They were really good at building a business, but going and becoming a franchisor is a completely different business. And, so as I look and as I've looked at many different brands out there, I always come back to betting on the jockey. You've got the horse, the brand, the business, the model, all of that. But what became increasingly important to me as somebody that's buying a franchise is the jockey, the person that is founding the brand, the people behind the brand. And it's not just, are they charismatic or whatnot? It's, are they going to be able to make really good decisions? What's their track record? And there's going to be people that get into franchising as a franchisor that don't have a franchising background, a successful track record as a franchisor. There's a lot of them out there, but that's why I partnered with Josh Skolnick, the founder of Monster Tree Removal, to start Mighty Dog Roofing, because he has that franchisor experience. And as we've grown Mighty Dog Roofing so quickly this year, with the goal of getting them open very quickly, the feedback has been, Erik, the team, it's you, it's Josh, it's Zach. We're betting on the Jockey. We know it's a great brand. We know it's a great industry, but we are betting on you guys as the Jockey driving this brand. So how important is the Jockey versus the horse to you when you're talking to these emerging franchisors?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, even when I invest, because I'm an investor in Capriati's, I absolutely bet on the Jockey. I love the sandwiches, but it was really, Ashley and Jason that I was betting on, because I find them to be exceptional leaders, and very driven and passionate and with a great work ethic. And so I think it's folks who, what I'm looking for in a Jockey, of those emerging franchisors that I will invest my time to mentor, are those that come well prepared, those that are going to invest the time and be coachable, those that think they have all the answers and are not willing and able to evolve themselves, to me, won't make a good Jockey or a good franchisor. Because a lot of the great ideas we've evolved our brand with have come from franchisees. And I think that's true with any large brand, like a McDonald's. Breakfast menu is because of a franchisee. But a franchisor has to be willing to say, my franchisees are hearing it on the front line, and they're going to have great ideas. And how do you embrace those and evolve the brand based upon that two-way communication with mutual respect? And so I can usually tell if a Jockey is going to have a successful brand, that they have good ideas, they're able to engage in healthy conflict, they don't let things fester, but they also are willing to admit that they don't have all the answers, and they're coachable from me or from their franchisees. And I think that's an important characteristic of a successful franchisor.
I like how you said healthy conflict. We're dealing with it right now with Mighty Dog Roofing. We just had our first training. We're not dealing with conflict, but we're dealing with what you just said. It could be conflict if we wanted it to be, but we're proactive. So what I mean is, we just completed our first training, and Monday, either Sunday or Monday, Josh Skolnick, one of my partners, reached out to, and he's going to do it with all of the new franchisees, but reached out to the first one that went back to their market and to get feedback on training. It was a 60 or 90-minute call, and Josh prepared 3 pages of notes for us to discuss on our weekly Monday morning ownership huddle. And he went through it, and he's like, guys, we got some really good feedback from these franchisees. And we went through it. And my comment was, they're right on everything. Are they always going to be right on everything? No, but they had such great feedback. And these are the types of franchisees that you want. They're giving healthy, constructive feedback, not trying to change stuff. And so we looked at that, and we're like, we have another training coming up in 2 weeks, right after another Discovery Day. And we're implementing the things that they said, because we know, just like you said, the best franchisors have a healthy relationship with their franchisees to have a good feedback loop. So if you were mentoring me, and let's say I didn't have Josh Skolnick, who has, tremendous amount of experience as a franchisor, and this last one, Redbox Plus, like 0 failures. But if you were mentoring me, I didn't have Josh as a partner, and I wanted that healthy relationship and that feedback loop with my new franchisees, how would you coach me?
Yeah, I think it's 2 things. I think one, a feedback loop is important. I think making sure there's dialogue, particularly in the very beginning. And so in the very beginning, I would do calls with a small group of franchisees, whether there was 3 to 5 in small groups, and then would reach out, one-on-one to the franchisees. I think that's really important, particularly that first 12 to 18 months. You're not large enough to do annual conferences, right? Which will become the evolution of that feedback loop. But in the early stages, it's picking up the phone and it's doing conversation. It's being willing to listen to what has gone well and what can be done better, and building in what can be done better, thanking them. And then once it gets implemented, circling back to them and say, I've taken your feedback. Here's what I've done. Now the training is better in this way, because we all do the third-party surveys that are, asking our franchisees how we're doing. And if we don't go back and say how we've made things better, they would be inclined to give a bad rating on initial training or a moderate grading on initial training, not realizing we had made the improvements that they had made us aware of. So I think that's really important to have those feedback loops and ongoing communications. And then we have best practice calls that we have franchisees lead. So they're sharing best practices one to another. Franchisees will always listen to another franchisee more than they will listen to the franchisor. That just will be true for the test of time. And then we do quarterly town hall calls where we're sharing what are all the things that are evolving with the brand. What have we done this past quarter? And what's lying ahead that you can look forward to changes or improvements coming in the next quarter that we prioritize. So I think that feedback loop is important. I think on the healthy conflict too, it's what I've learned in franchising is that a fast no is much better than a prolonged maybe, particularly with franchisees that are spending money and need to make decisions. It's sometimes I have found from members of my team that don't like to engage in conflict or be the bad guy that well, let me look into it and I'll think about it. And even though they know the answer is going to be no, or there's no way I would approve it because they're trying to deviate from a brand standard, a fast no with the reasons why a franchisee can actually tolerate much better than not letting them make a definitive business decision and stop money bleed quickly.
That was exactly where I was going to go. I was going to talk about the no and how do you give the no. So that was, you beat me to it, but that is something I think that, as a franchisee, so I have a franchisee hat. I have an area development hat, which is kind of between the franchisee and franchisor. You're kind of a franchisor without all the responsibility. And then as a franchisee. So as a franchisee, I was sometimes one of the best and one of the worst because I was always pushing the franchisor, always pushing the envelope, always asking for stuff. And I never minded getting a no. I might not like it, but I always appreciated it. And so one of the things I learned early on in my franchising career about 20 years ago is I always like to know where I stand with the franchisor. And back then, I didn't always have to like what was happening with the franchisor and the decisions that were being made, but I always knew where I stood. And so that kind of goes with you and what you're saying. A fast no is better than a long yes. I think that's what you said.
Prolonged maybe. Yep.
Prolonged maybe. That eventually gets to a no. Yeah, that
eventually gets to a no.
Yeah, that's the worst. So, how do you deal with franchisees that are always pushing back on that? They're always saying, well, where I'm going with this is me as a franchisee, I would always want to focus on new shiny objects. I would, what about this? What about that? Can't we do this marketing thing? Why can't we do that? And the franchisor would always come back and say, Erik, are you doing the basics? Are you picking up the phone? Are you calling people back? Are you doing whatever the basics are? So what's the balance there?
Yeah, I think it's listening and looking at performance. I think that what I learned in the very beginning is I used to do calls where all franchisees would share what they're doing, and franchisees that sometimes had the most to say, I knew that they were the worst performing. So very early on, I got permission, and now it's disclosed, and so I don't have to ask permission from franchisees that we were going to share the revenue rankings for all franchisees publicly in a newsletter. Every franchisee knows how every other franchisee is doing. And I think that helped us level set early that the people that franchisees wanted to listen to and we wanted to listen to are the ones that actually were performing well. And to your point, likely the ones that want to push the envelope that are not doing the basics are not performing well. And so work on your basics. And as soon as you're above average or in the top quartile, come back and talk to me about the bright, shiny object. Otherwise, let's have support work with you on getting the basics. And then your bright, shiny object will probably improve your performance. So I think that transparency of results and correlation of actually executing and driving revenue and good customer satisfaction through Net Promoter Score measurement would validate who I want to listen to and prioritize where they're pushing the envelope or not. And then we, as we've gotten bigger, we use our general marketing fund to do matching for franchisees, but there's certain thresholds. So to your example of the, answer your phone. If we have franchisees that aren't answering their phone at least 75% of the time within the first 3 answers, they don't qualify for matching funds. So there are programs in place to kind of enable or not enable their ideas to get reimbursement from the franchisor.
That's amazing. I want to talk about the dark side of franchising, because you're perfect with this, because you help emerging brands and coach emerging brands. And I'm sure not every emerging brand that you've had a phone call with turned out to be an amazing emerging brand. That's just business in general. I mean, that's what happens. So, but what have you seen as a difference between the brands that go on to do really well and the brands that fail? What are some of the differences that you've noticed? And the point of this is to help franchisees or future franchisees kind of understand, as they look at emerging brands, a brand that might be tilted more towards success versus might be tilted more towards just an unknown. Just setting them, so franchisees, setting a franchisee up for success a little bit, as they're looking at franchises.
Yeah, I think the 3 kind of characteristics I've seen of successful ones, and then if these are missing, the inverse is usually true where they're not successful, is they have a brand differentiation in the space that they're in, right? There really is a compelling competitive advantage that they have for the models that go on to succeed. They have had successful profitability in company-owned units that is helping to fund what the franchisor will need as it's growing and losing money until it gets to where it is learning, or to where it is earning money. And then the third is there's a coachability factor to that emerging franchisor to be going to IFA events, hopping on podcasts, reading books, seeking out mentors, whatever, but they're constantly trying to be better. Those that don't seek out trying to learn, and many of us didn't come from franchising. I didn't come from franchising when I sought to be a franchisor, but from February of 2006, I never missed an IFA convention. Usually I'm at the Leadership and Development Conference for Franchise Update. I'm constantly, continually both a mentor and a student now, but for the first 10 years, I was at everything being a student. And that's a kind of a common trait I see from those that have gone on to do great things, as they're constantly wanting to evolve and be better.
That's perfect. So how do you, as know that about a franchisor, a new, take yourself out of the circles that you run in, because who are the good mentors and people that are seeking different things out. But as somebody new, they're new to franchising, how do they know if their franchisor is coachable, is seeking out mentors? What would be some good questions that they could ask the franchisor or the development team that would just be a good setup to uncover that?
Yeah, absolutely. Are they a member of the IFA?
Number 1.
Yeah. Are they attending events for the IFA? How many of the executives of the franchisor have their CFE, Certified Franchise Executive? Because it says they're willing to put in the time to have a level of designation and of franchise competency and understanding. I think those are kind of important ones that I would be wanting to know about my franchisee. I'd be looking in the franchise disclosure document at their audited financial statements. How well capitalized are they? And oftentimes the company-owned operations are in the item 19. How well did they perform? And is that a level of performance I would be satisfied with? So those would be common things as a franchisee I would be trying to assess the franchisor on.
So when you say, just to make sure that we're clear here, on the audited financial statements, are you talking about the health of the franchisor, or are you talking about
the franchisor?
So let's take it, let's look at the other side of that coin from an emerging brand. And there's some accounting things for a newer brand, right? That may make those look worse than they appear. Like, how would you look at that? What I don't want is somebody to hear like they need to be making a bunch of money, and as a new franchisor, they're not making a lot of money. So how do you reconcile that? Or can you give the audience a little bit more clarity on that? I
think depending on what stage they're at, the audited financial statements are also going to have their balance sheet, right? So are they adequately capitalized with enough loan and money in the bank balance to fund support for the first year or two? So their income statement may not be making money if they're an emerging franchisor, but it typically would take most franchise brands $200,000 to $500,000 to get to the point in time of supporting their franchisees. And so does their balance sheet show the level of liquidity or approved debt to be able to still be around a year or two in the future? And so looking at a financial statement will tell that. If it's a franchisor that had successful company-owned units, those are typically disclosed in the franchise disclosure document item 19. And so that's an important thing, I think, for franchisees looking at for an emerging franchisor.
Thank you for that. That was, I think that'll be really helpful because we've never gotten into that much detail on this show. So as you, what do you see as something that you wish every franchisor knew? Like if you could just impart something to a franchisor, what do you wish they knew? And that goes into that coachable thing. What could you just impart to them? And the same thing for a franchisee. What do you wish you could just tell them that they just know that this is true and just believe it?
Yeah, I think for franchisors, if you have a business model that you really believe is going to be successful, and why franchise if you don't believe you have a business model that's going to be successful, overhire for the talent that you need for when you have 50 units versus when you have 0. Because the worst mistake, and I made it myself, is I was watching the dollars so early on that I would hire a $50,000 person because I was making no money versus the $75,000 person that could grow with me as I was going to grow from 0 to 10 to 30 to 50, and would have made that so much better for really not much difference of expense. If you were going to fail, you were going to fail bigger than $20,000 of difference in a salary. So I think that would be one that I would impart on emerging franchisors. On franchisees, if you've bought into a brand, you've done so usually for a reason. You were passionate about the jockey, or passionate about how the product or service was going to market. Follow the business model. Learn the business model, follow the business model. Don't try to tinker with the business model for the first year. Follow the playbook. Second year, I think a franchisee has earned the right to start questioning the playbook and whether it can be made better. And then I think you get to the third way, and it's equal two-way communication and equal footing. But I think in that first year, I think so many franchisees come in, they haven't really learned the business model yet, and they're already trying to tinker with it. Learn the basics, execute the basics before then trying to tinker with what you bought, because otherwise, why buy it?
So you are right with that. And it's probably the thing, franchisees that listening, it's the hardest thing to do. At least it was for me. The hardest thing to do is just to execute. And if you can just do that, and what I would also suggest is visit with franchisees that are doing well, and they'll probably say the same thing. There's like, just execute the system, execute the things that you're supposed to do in the beginning, and then start to innovate. Another question: who are your mentors? Who are you looking up to or seeking out for advice? And I'm sure it's evolved over the years, but who is in your like inner circle, or who would you like to meet that you haven't met yet?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very fortunate because I do have tapped into a lot of my friends in the franchise industry that I will call. But I mean, there's mentors / friends that I would call depending on what we're dealing with at a certain point in time, as we're evolving our compliance programs, as we're evolving our general marketing fund. It would be common to call, a Catherine Munson, a Charlie Chase. I've got an amazing board of advisors that I have evolved over the years. But right now I have 2 past chairs of the IFA on my board of directors. They have great franchising experience. One leans towards more of the marketing kind of background, one towards a finance background. I have the former CIO of AT&T which has been very helpful as we think about the investments in technology, consumer and caregiver facing technology, and streamlining of operations. And then I have a Harvard Business School professor that really does a lot around developing talent, succession planning, linking customer experience with how employees feel and execute on the front line. So usually I'm turning to my board on most of the things that that I'm looking at and navigating through. Like the last year of COVID, they've been a great sounding board and cheerleading squad when needed to keep going and persevering. But I think, I think a lot of, those that you would see speak typically at a lot of IFA events, a lot of those I'm, proud to call friends, but everybody has their kind of own expertise. I'm a founder who's still a CEO. That's kind of a unique trait at our size. We're a $600 million system. So, still being, running the day to day, I think becomes a unique set. Catherine Munson's a great, executor, great discipline as building a multi-brand platform. Charlie taking a company public, they're in a different set of challenges with publicly traded. And so I think it depends on who I need for what, but a lot of great names and great individuals to seek out that I met through the IFA and through franchising over the years.
I was going to say, you didn't all of a sudden, when you got your FDD for the first time, all of a sudden friends with all the leaders at the IFA. That just didn't happen. That was, I'm sure you're coachable and you were intentional with all of this stuff. And we are talking about the result of what you've done over the years. And when I heard you say all that, I mean, these are just great advisors and friends. And this is something interesting. Your advisors do become friends, everyone. Like if you, there's a good chance, and not always, but if you have those relationships and you seek out those relationships and you develop those relationships where you might really look up to somebody at some point, but all of a sudden they're now your friend. So any comments on that? I mean, how has that evolved for you?
And I'll give you a great example. My very first franchise event was October of 2005. I hadn't even opened my first franchise location yet, but was in the process of selling them. And the three teachers at the front of the program were Brian Schnell of Fagery and Benson. Law firm has changed names, but still kind of the same firm. Became a friend, has worked for me in my company, back being my attorney, a great human being that I got to know and become dear friends with and ask him tons of questions all the time. Kurt Landwehr, that we talked about before we started. I just after the class, I'm like, Kurt, I really want to be good at this. Could I pay you to spend like Thursday nights and Saturday mornings with me? And we did that for a couple of years because I'm an accountant. I'm not a franchise salesperson, but Kurt's one of the best, right? And so, being able to spend time, and we've become friends over the years. And then Tom Wood, who's the CEO of Floor Clubbing International, and Tom was a mentor for years, and now he was just at my 50th birthday party with 10 friends during COVID, right? So, like these folks that seem so unapproachable, maybe like they're out of my realm, that was 15 years ago. They were sitting in the front of the audience. I didn't know a soul in franchising. And now it is someone that I have in my cell phone that I can call at any moment in time, right? So
that's awesome. I mean, as a franchisee, when you go to a room, it's your franchise convention, and there are franchisees that seem unapproachable because they've been doing it for a while. They are the ones getting awards. Encourage you to reach out to them, become friends with them. They're in my mastermind, and they are the most successful are the most helpful in my mastermind, and they truly want to help. And you'll find that if you're willing to give value and you're willing to help and you're willing to do what they say. And I love what you said about Kurt, that you paid him. It was a relationship that was a professional relationship where you paid him, and then it turned into just a friendship. And that is more common than what a lot of people think. Pay people. If you want to learn from them, pay them, and then it turns into friendships.
Or at least offer. I'm like, Kurt, what can I pay you? I don't want to take advantage of your time, but I also have so much to learn, and you're who I want to learn from.
Yep. At least offer. And it depends really for me, people do that. And sometimes I charge and sometimes I don't, depending on how busy I am. And I learned this from Cameron Harold, always have some time to be able to give back to people for free. And so I definitely do that. But I think that was an amazing little sidetrack that we got on. But here's the other thing with all of that. And I heard everybody, the names and the connections, but also know that if you need something and they don't have the answer, that their network is now your network. And you're probably a phone call away from anybody you need to talk to with that group. I know I am in certain friends and groups that I'm involved with. I'm a phone call away of getting in touch with anybody. And that is invaluable. Is that true?
Yes, very much.
So as we kind of finish up, you have a book out there on Is My Business Franchisable? What's the name of the book, and like who should be reading that book? Because there's people listening right now that they're probably getting more motivated. They're like, I have the chops to be able to become a franchisor. But I don't know where to start. Where do you start?
So Grow Smart, Risk Less, and it's out on Amazon. And I say it's intended for those that have a business concept that they haven't yet franchised, or for any emerging stage franchisor that's probably under 100 units, that there are always areas in their business model that could be optimized. It goes through a lot of the key vendors, but also kind of key processes. I shared openly all of my organizational charts for my first 5 years, all of my key performance indicators for my first 5 years, but kind of going through that journey from losing money when you have 0 franchisees to getting to where you're what I call royalty self-sufficient, to where you don't have to sell another deal and the royalties are covering the expenses of supporting the franchisees you have. And that's a great turning point of being a franchisor, that you don't feel the stress of having to sell another franchise to make payroll and support the franchisees you have. And that's always a path I think a franchisor should be on. And for me, that took about 3.5 years, but I take it through the first 5 and sharing all the good and bad of what my franchise early stage journey. And I know a lot of franchisors today that have gone through that journey that kind of use that book as a guideline.
Audience. It may sound super simple. She's mentioned org chart, but I talk to emerging brands. We look at acquiring some, and some just look for advice from me. And org chart's one of the first questions that comes up, like, how should my org chart look? And you go online and it's hard to find an org chart. So like, this is probably the cheapest shortcut that anybody can do. So go buy the book. What was the name of the book again?
Grow Smart, Risk Less.
Grow Smart, Risk Less. It's on Amazon. We'll put the link in the show notes. Last question. And then I'll open it up for any last bits of wisdom that you have. Short-term versus long-term decision-making as a franchisor. Can you go into just your perspective on the difference between good short-term decision-making and good long-term decision-making as franchisors are growing?
Yeah, and I think it's important to set a vision around the long-term. What are the investments that need to be made to take advantage of long-term strategy? For me, long-term is usually around market segmentation, customer relationships I'm going to have to lose money on for multiple years before it's the right long-term decision, and technology investments typically. Short-term, we follow the book Traction by Gino Wickman. I'm a big EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System follower. We have been since 2013, and then I rolled it out to all of my franchisees as well, and had Gino come in for a few years and get that as part of our culture. We've got 95% of our franchisees doing quarterly rocks, conducting level 10 meetings. So that's how we go about kind of our short term. Is we're always doing a really in-depth 1-year plan. We do it in September for the following year. And then we're thinking about how do we chunk that out into 4 quarters. So we're focused on the short term, but it's always leading directionally to where do we want to be 3, 5, 10 years down the road, as we have to prioritize investments. We have lots of great ideas. We couldn't afford to fund them all. So what are the ones that are more likely to have a higher ROI? And that's what makes its way into kind of the 1 year priority directionally towards our 3 to 5.
Well, you summed that up into one word: traction. Get the book. Gina was just on the podcast. It dropped this week. So Gina we had a great time on that podcast. And I just, in the middle of confirming one of the best EOS implementers to come speak to my mastermind at our quarterly meeting, because franchisees in my mastermind really want to dive in.
Well, if it's not Chris White, I'll put a plug in for Chris White too. He's a great implementer.
Well, I'll have to get an intro from you on that. Shelly, any last bits of wisdom, anything you want to leave the audience with? A book, a thing, a thought, whatever.
I think it's just follow your passion. I think as a franchisee or a franchisor, if you're doing it because it's something that you're passionate about, the model you're passionate about, who you're going to serve you're passionate about, I think you can always find the resilience to get through what we've been through in the last 18 months or what feels like 18 months with COVID. Being passionate, I think, is a necessary ingredient. It can't be just about the economics of a brand, about a product or a service. It has to be a passion for what you're going to do each and every day. That's true for a franchisee signing up to represent a brand and sell a product or service and execute on it, or someone who's going to take something and franchise it. It needs to be something that's being done, I think, for the right reasons, because then I think that's what people are able to navigate through and win. When we talked about kind of what were the 3 things I saw about kind of the keys to success of those that made it versus didn't make it, that passion for what they were doing, belief that they were going to win because they had to, because they really believed in what they needed to bring to the marketplace, I think was a unique factor in all the ones I've seen succeed as well. I think that's true for franchisees.
Shelly, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks. My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Franchise Secrets Podcast. Whether you're watching or listening, please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to whatever channel you're listening on. If you want my help with anything from buying a franchise to franchising your business, please visit franchisesecrets.com.